Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest of the RMDS Lecture Series. And today we're going to be discussing blockchain with one of our community experts. My name is Jaden Yocom, and I will be conducting this interview. And we're joined by the lovely Albert Fattal, who recently attended the RMDS monthly meetup for September. And Albert has a background in blockchain and artificial intelligence. He graduated last year from the California Polytechnic University at Pomona with a degree in science, technology, and society, as well as a minor in computer information systems. So we're very lucky to be joined by Albert and excited to learn a lot from him as well. So Albert, did you want to mention any brief first statements?
Yeah, first off, thank you very much, Jaden, for spending some time with me. I know that RMDS actually has a pretty big conference coming up towards the end of next month. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be an exciting moment. And on part with Alex Liu, he has contributed so much to the organization, and I'm very honored to be here with you. And an exciting piece of news, I hear that recently you and your colleague Salvador had a publication with the influencer of, I think it's a robot in media. So congratulations on that. That must be a moment for you. Yeah.
It was a fun piece to write, and I'm hopefully looking forward to writing similar stuff in the future.
Yes, yeah. So quickly, my primary focus deals with artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies and how that can be integrated within things such as supply chain management, business-oriented functions. My latest publication deals with that very subject itself, the SCM, supply chain management, and security protocols that will be assessed by blockchain. And we can talk a little bit about that as we keep going on with the questions.
Definitely. That sounds really interesting. And where did you get that recent publication, just so that everybody can look up the journal and have a chance to read it?
Yes, I don't have the digital object identifier memorized on top of my head. However,
yeah, no worries.
In the CSU repository, if you go to their repository, I'm sure if you search blockchain, it may be one of the very few, perhaps even only one that's out there, based on how new the technology is.
Definitely. So I guess what I'd like to first ask you a little bit more about is sort of your background, and we can compound that with another question that I had, which is what interested you in the first place in blockchain and artificial intelligence, and why did you think it would be valuable to develop some of these skills and go into this field?
I think that's a very long story, but I will condense it as much as I possibly can. It really started as a child. I would watch movies, fascinating movies. Oftentimes they were science fiction, but I was mostly motivated by those of science reality, right? Mm-hmm. And I've had this imaginative wonder on how non-Homo sapien agents can have capacities such as consciousness, which, as you may know, your viewers may or may not know, that really isn't an abstract right now. However, in the future, that can happen. And that's always led me into the field. And security part with AI has been somewhat synonymous. So if we allow an intelligent agent to go on into the future without much security protocols, as we all know from devastating movies like Terminator, it can be very negative.
There can be significant ethical ramifications to implementing such advanced technology at such a fast rate, like as it's being developed. Definitely. So for some of our perhaps less informed viewers, which would be including myself, honestly, could you go over briefly what blockchain is and sort of explain that field itself or that piece of technology?
Yeah, Jaden, I think that's a very fair and excellent question to ask. Blockchain has a lot of mystery behind it. So let's conceptualize a block, right? Let's say there's one block here, and one block here, three blocks, right? And what connects them together is that chain. So blockchain, each block is an entity connected by a chain. The chain is a hexadecimal, what they call a hash, which has a hexadecimal value. And this is a very complex value that is extremely nearly impenetrable to get into. And that's what creates the fundamental security of what a blockchain is. So it includes the data, the hash, as well as the link to every other block. And very importantly, the beginning block is called the genesis block. And that might be a very simplified construct on how the blockchain would work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the main values perhaps then that people see within this blockchain technology, because I believe it was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was originally used for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, right? Go ahead. Did you want to interject?
Yeah. There's a misconception of
Okay.
Bitcoin being synonymous with blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if anything, I would say that the term cryptocurrency has significantly devalued the legitimacy of what the blockchain has to implement into functional structures. So with cryptocurrencies, we've heard of a lot of volatility that occurs behind the technology. So blockchain is the foundational technology that cryptocurrencies are built off of.
Gotcha.
It does not require cryptocurrencies to make blockchains work. Blockchain, the foundation, can have various other features, such as being tied into security protocols, right, for the Internet of Things. If you want to secure that, the blockchain is likely an excellent foundational security protocol to move into. But we did talk a little bit about cryptocurrency. Now, alternatively, I'd like your viewers to consider that peer-to-peer networks were essentially the beginning concept of what the blockchain is. So things like Napster, uTorrent, and torrents in general, these were peer-to-peer networks that have begun the concept of what today is blockchain.
Gotcha. So it's important to note then that as opposed to cryptocurrency leading to the development of blockchain, it was actually the other way around. Blockchain was absolutely necessary for the development of cryptocurrency.
You got it spot on. Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. I'm glad I understand that then. I think it's helpful to clarify some of these misconceptions about blockchain and artificial intelligence and words like that, just because there's definitely a lot of use within like the media nowadays of these words and within the corporate world. And sometimes people don't seem to be referencing the same things. So I'm glad you clarified there.
My pleasure.
So our next question is just going to be about what fields then you can see blockchain being applied towards, or what it's currently being used in, like most frequently.
Sure. So obviously, cryptocurrency is likely the biggest field that it is currently being used in, at least the most popularized field.
Mm-hmm.
However, I really want to stress that the two should not be mixed together. Where blockchain can most successfully be used is something like two contracts between stakeholders, a minimum of two stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned earlier, Internet of Things is an excellent resource to implement the blockchain. If somebody is seeking to purchase a house and they'd like a contract between each other, blockchain may be another excellent method to use because it's nearly impenetrable one. And number two, it is decentralized. So everybody has the same access of information. So there's fairness between that. So there are really countless and numerous ways that the blockchain can be used and essentially can be applied to just about anything.
Okay, cool. And I think that something that you mentioned there, the decentralization of the data from in regards to blockchain technology, that can lead us into a nice transition for our next question, which is what separates blockchain from different data tracking and data storage strategies. And I think hopefully, if I understand this properly, the decentralization would be a major one of those things, right? Because that's sort of part of the appeal of the security behind blockchain, is that you don't necessarily have these huge data warehouses where servers are filled with like private data and stuff like that. It can be kind of split apart across a network, right?
That's absolutely correct, and I'd like to stick to decentralization. This is the primary function of the question: is decentralized data, decentralized information in that security protocol. Whereas other security protocols, such as SSL, for example, requires private servers. Decentralized blockchains are built on computational hardware from all parties, whether it's you and me creating a contract between each other, or you and 50 other people creating a major, let's say, Bank of America, right, a Fortune 50 contract, something very severe and big. So that then brings us to fairness, because since we do have the same platform that a Fortune 50 does, somebody such as you and myself, who obviously does not have a multi-trillion-dollar industry, we can
Mhm.
leverage the same power as these larger companies, which then makes the playing field much more fair. So decentralization is where we're going to stick with that, because that really is the term that is synonymous with blockchain.
Awesome. And another term that you brought up, I think, a few times, and that I frequently hear brought up is peer-to-peer interaction. And I was just hoping you could explain kind of peer-to-peer interaction and how blockchain seems to influence that, and whether that's a valuable thing or something that should be discouraged.
Yeah, I know with technology, lingo can get far in between and can get really complex, but it's really as simple as two people, two or three, a minimum of two or more people directly interacting with each other through one form of medium, which is the blockchain. So
Gotcha.
there's no middleman in there. It's simply you and me if we were in a contractual agreement, or you and anybody else in that contractual agreement. There's just no middleman. Peer-to-peer is you and myself or any other party
Okay.
directly dealing with each other.
Gotcha. So it's the direct communication between members of the network, right? That the
Absolutely,
blockchain is a part of. Okay, gotcha.
nicely.
And of course, we do want to dive a little bit into artificial intelligence. Well, since a lot of what RMDS focuses on is artificial intelligence and the applications for artificial intelligence. And of course, for our annual conference, that's part of the theme, innovative methods with artificial intelligence. So I'm just curious as to whether artificial intelligence is currently being used alongside blockchain, or whether you see potential uses for artificial intelligence and machine learning alongside blockchain.
Sure. Look, Jaden, this is a 50-50 thing. So these are two hot terms, right? Blockchain and
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. Certainly AI, that's been a term that has been stirring up the minds for, I would say, the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But more applicably, really the past couple of years. It's been exploding.
Mm-hmm.
With blockchain, that's another hot term that's being used. They are not the same thing. They are two very, very different technologies
Mm-hmm.
designed to do totally different accomplishments. Whereas AI, which is an umbrella term of various other subfields such as data science, machine learning, deep learning, and many other fields,
Mm-hmm.
deals with intellectual understanding of data, proprietary information, public information. The blockchain is a completely separate entity in that it is securing data, securing information. And it doesn't have to be information. It can be connections. It could be a contract, once again, such as purchasing a house or a car, or even as simple as buying music online. So whereas one is an intelligent agent, the other one is simply and I shouldn't say simply because it's vital, a security
Mm-hmm.
protocol.
Gotcha. And so with the security protocol, is there any way, so you mentioned like the hexadecimal chain, like for example, I think there's some AI programs that are currently being taught like how to code things and stuff. Do you think that AI could ever serve a purpose like that within blockchain, like being one of the steps for like encoding data or something like that?
Sure. So in that sense, I would like to bring up devil's advocate and talk a little bit about a weakness of
Okay.
blockchain. So if you don't mind, it's important that we understand some of
Yeah,
the weaknesses
definitely. I
as
agree.
well. Going into the future, quantum computing has become fairly popular and aggressive among large companies to create quantum computing. And the way that a quantum computer works through a qubit chipset is fundamentally different from a conventional silicon chipset. So whereas a silicon chipset would need to, in sequence, go through ones and zeros, I's and O's, ons and offs, a quantum computer can simultaneously do all of that just about instantaneously. So it's
Wow.
far more quick to think, you could say. So because blockchain uses hexadecimal values as well as computing power, right now it takes an immense amount of computing resources and power for the blockchain to be hacked. Because one of the way that you can hack a blockchain is to have at a minimum of 50% of the computing power. And keep in mind, if we're if we have a contract with, let's say, 5,900 people, that's a huge amount of computing resources that would take quite a lot of money to have the same value of 5,900 people. However,
Definitely.
quantum computers, they can almost do it instantaneously. So that is a concern. But it's also a new technology, and I very easily see it being overcome as we develop all technologies.
Definitely.
Eventually.
So for most blockchain researchers, they might be a bit wary of the possibility that quantum computing and strengthened computing powers in the future could like undermine some of that technology.
It's on most people's minds,
Okay,
absolutely.
gotcha,
Something
gotcha.
that,
That's good to know what's sort of on the radar of the professionals in this field.
yeah,
It's always
yeah,
valuable to have that information. Um,
yeah.
Another question that I wanted to ask is, because we do hear so much about blockchain and we hear that term used frequently in regards to this sort of technology, are there any other technologies that are similar to blockchain that might receive less publicity, like any methods for data, transfer and storage that use like a similar idea with like decentralization or something like that?
Because it's a fairly new technology, you will find that there are hundreds and hundreds of competitors with them. And most of the times they're either a knockoff of what blockchain is, or something like Tangle, for example, which is the same concept as blockchain, but has various differences between being webbed versus chained. But
Okay.
essentially, it all comes down to having the same ideological structure, with technicalities being the differentiation. And because we're so new to it, I wouldn't put my money on anything else other than blockchain, at least at this time.
Mhm.
But I mean, if we think about history, some of the biggest competitors in the past have been something like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, right?
Mhm.
Where one had competing formulas between each other. And fun fact, I think actually Coca-Cola or Pepsi had the chance at one time to purchase the other, but decided not to. But
Yeah, I'm sure whoever had that chance probably regrets.
absolutely. Oh yeah. And history is repeating itself. It's a lot like that now with blockchain and similar technologies competing with the blockchain.
Hmm.
Uh, right now, because the blockchain is the most heavily used, that's the one that likely is going to be the top contender.
Gotcha.
I do
Historical
see,
inertia or whatever type of thing, right?
sure, yeah,
Gotcha.
I do see Tangle as a possible competitor as well.
Okay. And maybe then, since I actually haven't heard of Tangle, which is obviously reflective of my research and knowledge about this subject, but do you want to talk a little bit about the web approach versus the chain approach, and why might somebody see value in the web approach?
Yeah, sure. So I likely shouldn't say too much about Tangle because my primary focus is within blockchain. Uh,
Okay.
however, the basic idea of why it may not be as successful as the blockchain are the stakeholders that are utilizing it. It has a much less amount of user base versus the blockchain. And as
Gotcha.
we know, with a larger user base, it's number one, a lot easier to use. Number two, it has an entire community that's always building upon it, such as an open source, an OS program or
Yeah,
project.
definitely.
So that alone may likely make the blockchain the clear winner. It is right now the clear winner,
Hmm.
but because it's so new, as time goes by, we'll have to wait and see where Tangle goes from here. I wouldn't
Okay.
put too much money on that right now.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And how do you see blockchain evolving over the next, 10 to 15 years or so?
That's an exciting question,
Yeah.
Jaden. That's one of the most exciting questions to answer. So let's put aside AI right now because that's a pretty common term that most people are somewhat familiar with. I think
Mhm.
if we focus on the blockchain and
Yeah,
how it can progress into the future, that might bring enlightenment to many
I think
people
so. I think so.
because it is the security protocol. Everybody is concerned about their data. When I go to the library or to the laboratories, I always see people with a post-it right in front of their webcam right here, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
I
yeah,
always see that
absolutely.
everywhere, and I think that's a funny concept because although they might block their webcam, their phones are never blocked. So I find that funny. But that alone tells you that even in 2019, today, that security is a huge deal. It's always been a big deal. And that's what blockchain is in an attempt to solve, is to solve security breaches, hacks within it. And although it may not be 100% solved, it's going to be much higher than it currently is, maybe even in the 99th percentile, which would be a huge track forward. And that's the beauty of the blockchain. Hopefully, my vision with the blockchain is that the entire internet foundationally uses the blockchain to create secure communications between one ping to another ping.
Definitely. And as well as perhaps, do you think that institutions might adopt blockchain technology, such as like, places of education and government, facilities and centers? Do you think that's a possibility in the future?
I don't think it's a possibility because I know it is being used right now.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
there's no possibility. It definitely is already happening right now. A couple of days ago, I met with an individual from an intelligence agency, and I can't say too much about that. But I did talk to them about my research in the blockchain, and they knew exactly what I was talking about.
Wow.
And hinted again that it is very seriously being considered, perhaps even used. So Bank of America has already begun implementing blockchain in their systems. I believe Facebook is an attempt. Again, I don't want to throw cryptocurrency, but I believe they are building their own cryptocurrency that will.
I've heard of something like that.
Yeah. Across the globe. And their advantage is that they have just about every user, perhaps a much larger user base than the biggest bank, which I believe is Bank of America right now. So that inherently makes it a lot easier for them to implement something using a blockchain protocol behind it. The real answer is that it's very heavily being used, looked at, researched, and moved forward to a real possible depletion of alternative technologies, perhaps SSL, and completely and unilaterally replace it with the blockchain.
Wow. And so do you think that it's a possibility in the future that governments make the full transition to cryptocurrency?
Is it possible? Yeah. In fact, I would hope that it is, but I would never think that it's going to happen anytime soon.
Okay.
Many people right now that perhaps are not as literate to the blockchain to feel comfortable using it.
Gotcha.
So with larger investors, with a large portfolio and a large investment, they're likely not going to transition their life's savings into something that they are completely unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a generational change. It's likely to happen, but no, I can definitely say that it's not going to happen anytime soon, but I can say that it'll likely happen into the future.
Yeah, and the transition may occur within our generation, but it probably won't be complete for a fair amount of time.
Yeah, in our generation, I strongly believe that it will. We're talking in an age where technology and science is progressing so fast that the majority of people can't comprehend how quickly it's changing. It's altering. That alone is a strong indication that it will happen in a lifetime. In the next 20 years, 30 years would probably be a good bet.
Hopefully, if we can get through all the climate change stuff, we'll get to see the other side of this technology.
If we survive that, that's looks like that's where we're going.
There's been some recent research about that, and people are placing some pretty low estimates on how many years the globe has left. But definitely interesting, and that actually probably has dimensions in data science and AI as well, because there are people studying like climate science through big data and machine learning to look at like climate patterns and like natural disasters and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Real quick, I recall hearing a fact on the, I think it was the EPA's website. We have about, in our current use of gasoline, we have a maximum of 50 years of gasoline or petrol reserves left.
Wow.
So we're getting real close to the edge of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But to transition to a brighter topic, I think there's a lot of people here that will end up watching this video, and myself included, that really value all the things that you've had to say, and we'd love to know how you kind of developed some of this knowledge. So if you have any books or article resources or website resources where you think it would be good for people to look at for developing knowledge about blockchain and AI, I think people would really appreciate that.
Yeah. This again, maybe another one of those exciting questions to have to answer,
Mm-hmm.
because we're essentially in the beginning of this technology.
Mm-hmm.
Those that are seeking to leverage themselves to place themselves into the future, Industry 4.0, as it's called alternatively,
Mm-hmm.
going into the blockchain right now is the perfect time to get into it. I would recommend a book, The Truth Machine by Dr. Casey, but I believe it's Dr. Casey, The Truth Machine. This is an excellent book to get into. And then there's another one. It's simply called Blockchain by Melanie Swan. These are two of the most popular books that are
Okay.
currently being used. I don't want to bite my tongue on that because it's such a new technology that I would think literature is going to change drastically. But these have been two consistent books that have been used heavily within blockchain. Uh,
Okay.
and if we go back to artificial intelligence, you may know Andrew Ng, Stanford, one of the leading,
Yeah.
one of the leading AI scientists and
Yeah. I think he
professors at
leads
Stanford.
Uber's AI development, if
Yeah,
I remember correctly. Yeah.
and these are freely available courses on Coursera, which I
Oh,
believe
wow.
Andrew Ng is one of the primary founders of Coursera.
Wow.
So using Coursera is great. I know how difficult it can be to get to a top tier academic institution.
Mm-hmm.
Alternatively, you can have that top tier education through something like Coursera freely online. I think these are
Nice.
wonderful resources to go into and understand the technology just a little bit more.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I appreciate those recommendations, and I'll make sure to check some of those websites and texts out. Um, Another thing that I wanted to bring up, sort of just due to my own self-interest, perhaps being interested in the ethics of artificial intelligence so heavily. We hear about AI and ethics a lot, but I'm not sure if I've ever heard blockchain and ethics in the same sentence before. So I'm curious as to whether there are any ethical questions or considerations that are currently being made about the use of blockchain and the implementation of blockchain.
Wonderful question to ask, Jaden.
Thank
I think it's important that our viewers do hear the ethical implementations
you.
regarding blockchain. And
Hmm.
as you mentioned, of course, we have a lot of research going into AI, not necessarily so much into blockchain,
Hmm.
simply because it is a much less researched field.
Hmm.
Although I do see that changing as it becomes more popularized, and there really is no other option than to go into the ethics, the morality of using blockchain and research and understanding and knowledge behind it. Right now, it's being looked into, but nowhere near where AI is being looked into in an ethical perspective. But that will likely change as it becomes much more popularized. Right now, the only people that can really leverage things like blockchain are large Fortune 500s, and as we know, they may not be the most ethical companies to to trust building these.
Hmm.
However, on a different perspective, the people that are building it are passionate about the technology, and they themselves are working extremely hard. I know a couple of colleagues
Absolutely.
that work heavily within blockchain, and oftentimes when I talk to them, one of their driving forces of using and building the blockchain is the fairness of it all. And that, I think, inherently makes it a really ethical decision to use something like that.
I think so. I think people do tend to sort of agree with that. And I think people feel a certain sense of greater like connection or community with some technologies that are more open and that, you know, like decentralized data and things like that. Because there's an organization called OpenSUSE that you may have heard of. And, you know, they're an open source platform for like an operating system. And it's Linux based, and their community is so active, and they travel around the world and meet up with each other, and, you know, work on developing this platform together. And it's really encouraging to see that there are people that are so motivated by the promise of these new technologies that they are willing to, you know, work together at a high degree and, you know, put in all of their dedication towards this like one technology. And I
Jaden,
can
you
definitely see
definitely
that
know
in you
your
with
stuff. Yeah,
blockchain. Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm glad
you're
that we
right.
have you on the side of blockchain for sure.
Yeah, the community is, I think, the reason that keeps people together, the reason why people work together to communicate, to collaborate together, to build a better future. Yeah, the community such as Meetup, I know that there are various meetups where enthusiasts from researchers, primary researchers, to those who are enthusiasts to get together to build a more ethical foundational technology.
Absolutely. And that's a good transition into our next question, because I actually wanted to ask you whether you see a fair amount of like blockchain-based events and happenings within the tech community, or whether you think there needs to be an expansion of that sort of thing.
I'm always going to say that there needs to be more, whether there needs
Okay.
to be more AI events or conferences or
Mhm.
lecture series. I'm always on the side of we need more.
Definitely.
There is a heavy amount of AI conferences, not necessarily the case with blockchain. So if I were
Gotcha.
to pick one or the two, I would like to say that, yeah, the blockchain community can use just a little bit more conferences, lecture series, and even within educational institutions, MIT, Carnegie, Caltech. These are primarily STEM-based, fantastic university. Uh,
Absolutely.
I think these are great institutions to go big with blockchain. They've already done that with artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
It'd be
definitely.
great to go big with blockchain.
Definitely. So we'll probably start to see more, centers and programs for like blockchain popping up at places like UCLA and USC and Caltech and things like that. Actually, I'd imagine Caltech has some sort of courses at least dedicated to it, or maybe a program in place already. Um,
Yeah, that may be the case.
Definitely. Well, that's awesome because, we can hopefully collaborate further in the future with between you and RMDS and perhaps lead some sort of blockchain conference or seminar. And that would really be wonderful, I think, for you to have a chance to educate people directly and interact with some of the RMDS community directly about blockchain, which you're clearly so passionate and knowledgeable about.
Thank you.
Def-
I'd like to mention in October, I believe it's October 26th,
Mhm.
IDEA's International Data Engineering and Science organization, which is a partner of RMDS. In fact,
Yeah,
I believe Alex
ideas.
and IDEA's founder, Jason, they are actually great friends. I will be speaking at the IDEA's National Conference at the LA Convention Center at the end of October. So if any of your viewers are
Okay.
seeking more information, that's a wonderful community to get involved in. They may even see you. I'm sure you'll be there.
Yeah, I'll probably be there as well, and
Yeah.
I'll definitely stick around for your talk. That's really wonderful. So congratulations on that opportunity. And just for the viewers as well, if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about Albert's publications and his background, you have a website which I believe is your first and last name.com. So it's Albert, like Albert Einstein, and then Fattal, FATTAL.com, right?
Yeah, you got it spot on. So my website is where I place my latest, whether it's conferences, lecture series, uh,
Mm-hmm.
research, publications. I'm trying to get one out by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a little tough, but we'll see how that goes. If not the end of this year, by next year. But yeah, that's really the place to be. AlbertFattal.com. If any of the viewers are interested in following my work.
Yeah, I'm sure some people will definitely visit the website, and I've checked it out as well. You definitely have a nice, clean layout, and I'm looking forward to reading your most recent publication once I have the chance. So
Thank
that'll
you,
be a
Joe.
lot of fun, definitely. And I guess to conclude for our viewers, we could perhaps provide them some advice from you, seeing as you are, this definitely up and coming blockchain researcher. You're speaking at all these events, and you're really getting your name out there with all these publications. So in maybe like one or two or three sentences, what would you say to somebody who is interested in learning about blockchain and perhaps even starting a career in blockchain or AI?
It's as simple as this, Jaden. Go to meetups,
Mm-hmm.
attend courses online, and be a
Mm-hmm.
practitioner of blockchain and AI. That's all there is to it. It's a little more
Okay.
complex than that, but that's the beginning stages of it. Go to
Definitely.
meetups, be a practitioner, and be involved in the community.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sitting down, Albert. I really appreciated this conversation with you. If there's anything you want to mention to the viewers before we conclude, you can go ahead and discuss, whatever work you're doing currently, or.
Yeah, I'd love to close this lecture series off by thanking you, Jaden, for having me on here with RMDS, Research Methods and Data Science. I know that you guys deal heavily with artificial intelligence, and it's my passion, my love. This is what I enjoy doing. So I feel very valued to be a part of the community, and I'm very grateful of it. I thank Alex Liu for developing this organization for the community. As well as all the others in sight. But, as we look forward into the future, we're getting into a wonderful place right now. We're transitioning to Industry 4.0, the future of what the Internet of Things can be and how it'll interact with everything, including things such as AI and the blockchain very heavily. It's an exciting time that we're living in, and I can't wait to see what we have to invent and going into the future.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to exploring the future with you and hearing more about your names, as it pops up in headlines and history books alike. So thank you so much for sitting down, and for all of the viewers, this is Jaden Yocom from RMDS, and I'm going to be signing off. So thank you so much for attending our lecture series, and special thanks to Albert Fattal. Make sure to visit his website if you get a chance, and check out some of his recent publications. And if you have a chance, stop by the Ideas Conference in Los Angeles, and you can hear him speak even more in depth about this fascinating field. Okay, thank you so much, Albert. Bye.
Bye-bye.